With the Collegium's funding and help, I taught a course last fall, Making Sense of Cultural Data. This was a seminar that was focused on facilitating students' use of data science and digital humanities methods. Some people call this the computational humanities, to conduct original research on cultural texts and phenomena. So films, photography, social media platforms like Twitter and Instagram, newspapers, news sites like BuzzFeed, and just everyday life, the things that make up our common culture, real estate, grocery shopping. My goals for teaching computational humanities this way was to attract a different kind of student to data science, was to diversify and make more inclusive a data science course. And I think that the class achieved that through no real effort of my own, but literally just by advertising a course that was about cultural data. And perhaps having, woman faculty member of color too helped a little bit, but that's my theory about it. Some examples of some individual projects. These are all undergraduate projects because I wanted to foreground undergraduate original research. Oh yeah, this is the first one. It's called #Foodstagram by Vivian Liu. Vivian wrote an Instagram scraper, so she was able to scrape every single post on Instagram that was hashtagged food. And her finding was that food is never its own hashtag. In other words, you could have #food, but right after #food comes a million other portmanteau hashtags like #food photography or foodtography, #food blogger, #food picture, #foodaholic, and so on and so forth. And one thing that Vivian noted was how many professional or proto-professional, pseudo-professional hashtag portmanteaus there are. And then she did a network analysis. I think this is using Cytoscape, just showing each little sub-circle is a group of hashtag portmanteaus that all go together. I know it's super hard to read in this way. And she also did what we call a summed image or an average image of all of food posts on Instagram. And you can clearly see the plates in the middle of the frame. But it is interesting how few people there are in it. In the third photo, you can kind of see hands kind of reaching for the plate. But mostly it's just the food without any setting, no people. And she just noted that this centrality of this, this strong draw to the center of the frame was really different than other very popular generic hashtags like selfie, Golden Gate, sky, and sunset, which are the summed frames on the bottom. This is a great project. I love this project by Ronnie Walker. He's a young man who works for Bear Walk. Bear Walk is the program by which you can call a person to help you, to walk you home, in essence, if you're working on campus late at night and you don't feel safe walking home. Ronnie is a bear walker, and he decided to ask every single person that he bear walked home how safe they felt or uneasy they felt in different parts of the campus as they walked through it on a scale of 1 to 5. And initially, Ronnie was hand drawing the maps of the campus, and then he realized that was ridiculous. He's a computer science student. So he made a program that allowed him to generate digitized maps. And this is the sum map of our campus and all of his walkies' unease. And you can see the greatest unease is in North Campus and South Campus and that center street kind of corridor coming in from campus, and also, west of Shattuck too. And one thing that Ronnie noticed was that Nixle alerts actually increase students' unease. So that after the Nixle alert peak in north side of Berkeley, which is that blue bar, that high blue bar, actually there was a little bit of a lag in unease, and unease peaked after Nixle alerts peaked. So one thing that Ronnie postulated is like, are Nixle alerts actually making people more scared? And he depicted this in gathering his data on the campus before the Nixle alerts about the robberies on the north side and after the Nixle alerts came out. And all of a sudden the north side appears after the Nixle alerts as this strong, this place that people are afraid of. I wanted to show you, well, I'm just going to try to show it to you. I wanted to show you Ronnie's, his sort of, moving map of all of the different maps of individual people that he walked home, which I think is such a lovely visual display. A lot of what students were experimenting with was visualizations. And, oh, okay, maybe I can just close this. Yeah. just close. Okay, yep, all right. Sorry, not a Windows person. Oh, thank you. Okay. And now we'll just go, I'm going to skip this one. Oh, no, I'll do this one. Maybe I'll skip some of the group ones. This is a great essay article, paper by Ikea Kandula. She is graduating right now. This is called Shared Struggle, A Case for Solidarity in Black Lives Matter. And this was about her hypothesis that hashtag Palestine and hashtag Ferguson were actually quite related, that Palestinians were talking quite a lot to Ferguson Black Lives Matter activists. That was just a kind of gut instinct she had based on tweets like this that expressed solidarity, but the data did back it up. Here was her sorting of the most mentioned Twitter users in hashtag Ferguson, and Bassem Masri is a doctor who has lived in both Palestine and Ferguson, and he wrote quite a lot through all the protests about Black Lives Matter and about Palestine. Sorry, that's a repeat slide. And then the next thing that she did in Voss Viewer was create a network analysis showing the relation between all of the hashtags that were used in conjunction with hashtag Ferguson. And you'll see this red spur in the upper left is all about Palestine. It says Palestine, Bassem Masri, Nazareth, Solidarity, Hands United, Common Oppressor. So there are lots of ways that that spur is really about hashtag Palestine and hashtag Ferguson. And by the way, at the bottom it says, IKEA's paper is currently under review at Social Media and Society. So one great outcome is that I encourage students to submit their papers for publication, and IKEA is the first one who, that review process happened pretty quickly. She's revising it now for publication, and, she's an undergraduate. So that was a great outcome for us, and I think there will be other papers from this class. Maybe I'll just share one group project, which is not, I would say this project is not 100% successful in terms of having really concrete findings that show the power of data science, but I think it was really interesting for its findings with method. So these students, Jingyi Li, Wenshan Li, and Sarah Weinstein, a team of undergraduates, and I realized belatedly, all CS people, not a humanist among them. That was maybe a bit of a mistake in my putting them together. But one thing they focused on was trying to answer a cultural question through multiple methods of data science, not just one. So what they did was they looked at canonical changes in media text. They looked at times when television series or movie franchises had a strong turn in whatever was going on in the kind of larger narrative of the text. So they looked at instances in which a couple got together on a TV show who hadn't been together before. They looked at the casting of Hermione on the Broadway production of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, in the London production, Hermione was cast with an African-British actress, and also Finn in Star Wars was cast with an African-British actor. So they looked at these canon changes and also analyzed fan art. So another thing they did was they created face recognition software for fan art, the fan art site Tumblr. So they made a lot of ways to scrape data that hadn't existed before, similar to Vivian's Instagram scraper. And they, of course, found that one of the big changes of the canonical shift is just a huge explosion in fan art production. So there's a lot more production, that, as this bar graph shows. But then here are just some of the methods they use to try to compare before and after production. In the left, you'll see that they didn't sum, but they sort of grouped every Tumblr fan art image before the canon shift and after the canon shift. So there's obviously a lot more fan art after these canon shifts. Does the color palette change, or are we seeing anything in the summation of the fan art? I'm not sure, but I think it was interesting to do. And in the upper right, this was another summed image or average image methodology where they looked at how the images of Finn and Hermione changed after the canon shift, after the casting was announced. And here in the lower right, you can see their facial recognition software at work on Tumblr, and this shows that it's not perfect. The software recognizes Sherlock's face but it recognizes Will Graham's face, but it doesn't recognize Hannibal's face. It only gets his ear. So these are just some ways that students use this class to experiment with methodology and visualization. This was, I don't have a moving version of this, unfortunately, but this was the coolest tool. It came out of that same group where they were able to create what they called a barcode visualization of all fan art on the internet for certain hashtags, and you could scroll through these, and it was the coolest thing, and I'm sorry I can't navigate that for you today. But this is just to say that there was much fewer Finn art in the Star Wars hashtag before his casting was announced, and then after his casting was announced, there was just an explosion of fan art. That was before the movie was released. People were making a lot of art about that character. You do see this like extreme darkening on the right. I'm not really sure what that is, but okay, that's my time. So